Welcome to Exploring the Divine Feminine. I'm your host, Ramona Sidaway, and this is episode number 9. We discuss all things related to the feminine divine, mostly within the context of the Restored Church of Jesus Christ. Let's dive in. So today I have my son, Joe Sidaway. We talked to his wife and his sister a couple of weeks back. His wife is Muriel and his sister is Rachel, and we talked about presiding in the home. And I thought, since he and I have had some great discussions both about the book and about presiding and the priesthood, I wanted to get some of his thoughts as well. Joe, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. So my name's Joe. I am actually in school for physical therapy right now at Angelo State University. I served a mission. I graduated from BYU just this year, actually, in exercise science. And the son of this wonderful author, but I'm a little biased. So.
Oh, stop. All right. So let's start with, what is your definition of preside?
So it's interesting because I've put a huge question mark, I guess, beside preside, because I've always heard the term, but not really had any strict definitions of it. I thought the book helped encompass what I feel about preside, which it talks about how some of the translations of the Latin is standing guard or to sit in front of in kind of a protective sense. So I think for me, presiding is a responsibility or duty of protection. That's what I think of what that means, presiding.
Yeah. And just really quick for new listeners, we take a lot of our discussion from my book, We Are Adam, the partnership of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and what it means for you. And it's available on Amazon and cedarfort.com. So you can pretty much get it anywhere. I've been able to find it on target.com and just other outlets. So, but the chapter 12 discusses the role of a husband and father, and chapter 16, what does it mean to preside? And I've gotten female responses, and that's one of the reasons I wanted my son, and eventually I'll have my husband on here, and we'll talk about it as well and how we've used presiding in the home. And I know every couple's a little bit different. Joe, with you and your spouse, with Muriel, do you find that you do some things different in terms of presiding, or is it such a general idea that you feel like you preside in roughly the same way? And I know you guys are newlyweds. They have a 7-month-old baby boy, so they're just getting started on this journey. But what are some of your thoughts on the way you are presiding and the way you saw your parents preside?
Yeah, so I think compared to other examples that I've seen, it's hard because I think of presiding as so intimate, meaning that a lot of the conversation and discussion where you might see presiding or protecting or such, it's when Muriel and I are by ourselves, right? And so as a child, you don't get to see that a lot of times in your parents. Some do, but I think on the whole, you don't see the very intimate conversations.
So the decision making.
Yeah. So I think it's decision making. So for us, I found that I preside mostly in area of stewardship. So we both receive revelation and guidance, but there's some things that I perhaps would be tended more to think about and worry about or pray about, whereas Muriel would think, like, for example, taking care of Jackson, Muriel is just on top of, timelines, making sure to bathe him, and counseling as a couple about how do we take care of Jackson. I think a lot about how do we take care of each other financially, or how do we, I'm a student, so what is that going to look like when I'm graduated? I feel like those are just different areas that
Right. So do you feel like that's more of a cultural thing that the stewardship is placed upon you, or do you feel like it's a more genetic because of your gender?
That's a good question. Honestly, I think it's a little bit of both. I
Yeah.
think that I think that there is something definitely that is involved in gender, um, not even from just a physical, but just from an eternal perspective. We know gender is eternal, so I think, but also as well, I recognize I'm a product of my culture. So
Yeah.
no matter what, you're going to be influenced by that.
So part of it's your brain because female brains are different than male brains.
Hmm.
There's no getting around that. And and that's what I've tried to do with my book, my articles, and the podcast, is talk about how our differences are like two pieces of a puzzle that are meant to go together.
Yeah.
And it creates a much more powerful, beautiful picture that is cohesive. It's better for the world and it's better for the family.
And
It's what I feel like.
kind of something with that is like we both, Muriel and I, like we counsel about everything. So for example, talking about finances, when we first got married, our approach to finances were on the whole pretty similar, but there were some differences. I was much more focused on savings. She was much more focused on investing, right?
Oh,
And kind of about the how those pieces mesh. We just talked about it a couple days ago, how we both are now in the middle. She's more on board with saving and realizing how that's important, whereas before she didn't really care
yeah.
too much. Whereas now I'm thinking about investing, and before I hadn't even thought about investing. So it's kind of, I think, as you continue just experiencing, you come at it from a different angle. But I think presiding is helping nurture that culture in your relationship where it's a safe place that you can
Yeah.
become one, if that makes sense.
So, as I listen to you and I think about presiding as protecting, and as we know, there's opposition in all things. So protecting one way where a family feels safe, there's also protecting where a family will not feel safe.
Yeah, basically when you're given the priesthood and you try to gratify your pride, or exercise dominion or compulsion upon the souls of the children of men in any degree of unrighteousness, and then it says, the heavens withdraw, the spirit of the
Yeah.
Lord is grieved, all of that.
So even if either spouse decides that they want to take over and take control on any aspect of the marriage, and they do it because of pride, laziness, or they feel or in any sense of control, then I feel like it's just so damaging for the relationship and for the marriage. And that's in part why I've been very vocal against any one of the spouses being the head,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like you're both the head. You're two halves of one whole. And I think we go back to the template of Adam and Eve was taken from Adam. That's a symbolic, that's a very symbolic image. If they were two separate people, then yeah, you could probably make a much greater case for one being like maybe Adam being over Eve,
Mm-hmm.
but they were two of one. They
Mm-hmm.
were one person,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't have one person and one be higher than the other. It'd be like you'd be walking with a limp,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much, and you don't want your marriage to limp. You don't want
Mm-hmm.
the family to limp. And for whatever reasons, I really think it was a big cultural thing that for centuries that man decided he was going to just take over and be the head and make all the decisions, make the final decisions. And that's a little bit the way I grew up, where it was my father who made all the final decisions. And with your dad and I felt like we have a much more equal say. And even though at times we get tired and we decide, and it's more me than your dad, where I'm like, you decide on the money stuff, you decide on whatever. And he is very adamant. It's like, no, we're going to make this decision together. You need to have an equal voice in this. I mean, and even though I'm willing to hand that power over,
Mm-hmm.
he knows that's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And so, what are your thoughts on the husband, the father being the head of the household versus the two together as a head?
That's a really good question. And this is an area I am not as. I'm still asking a lot of these questions. I mean, first off, we've been married a year and a half, right? So not too much experience. But at the same time, as I've thought about it, I guess we know that like President Oaks talks about how his father died when he was young, and his mom became the head of the household, right? And so I think of the head of the household as like, I guess either it's for just purely administrative purposes as a contact point, or there could be something else. But like as far as thinking in the church, designated as the head of the household, I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, as far as the church records, they always designate the husband as the head of the household. And I mean, I know that's more for, like you said, administrative.
That's what I would think. And so I guess, are you asking more though in another context, or?
Yeah, just any context. I mean, you know me, I've been very vocal about some stuff, and I'm not as and we've talked about this several times in the podcast, how presiding in the church is way different than presiding in the home. Even Boyd K. Packer and Elder Tom Perry, they both were very adamant about this and saying that there is no president or vice president. And that's how I see as a head of the household, is you have a president and a vice president. But that's, if you're both part of one head, then you're both the president. You're both the CEO. And, but as far as administrative, one needs to be the voice.
So something I just thought of is, like, I'm reading those quotes. There's not a president or a vice president in the family. Even Boyd K. Packer says that in the home, it's a partnership with husband and wife, equally yoked together, sharing decisions, always working together. So I think you're right. They have made that very clear, that they are equal partners.
Yeah.
So I've always thought of it like cooking. I love cooking, so I think of like cooking in a kitchen where one person might be in charge of cutting vegetables, the other person's in charge of, baking the bread, another person's in charge of whatever. And so you're all working for the same purpose, but you are the head of the vegetables. You are the head of the bread.
You were the steward.
You were the steward over that, and that's how I feel like the relationship works. Is that in some areas, men, as it says in the Family Proclamation of the World, men are given the responsibility to preside, provide, and protect. And I think when it comes to providing needs for the family, we always think of physical, but even spiritual blessings, right? They have through holding the priesthood, they're able to administer necessary blessings and other things, and provide an example of a priesthood holder. But also in protecting, I think it just means that's like I'm in charge of it. It's not like Muriel never helps with protecting or providing. She's the one who's making the money right now while I'm in school, right? So obviously there's everyone helps, but that's still my stewardship, and she has stewardship over nurturing and raising children, right? And we help each other in that.
Well, a couple of thoughts come to my mind. I think in a successful relationship, and of course it ebbs and flows, with everybody, is that both spouses need to feel respected, I think, is the bottom line. And I have never felt like a vice president with your dad. I've always felt like a co-president, and actually in the church, they've started doing this more, at least with the youth program, where they had both, with a lot of these stake activities, they have both male and female young men and young women as co-heads. One was not the the leader and the other was co-leader. They were both co-heads. And so I see the church even moving in that direction, at least with the younger generation, of like, okay, look, this is how we're going to do this. And when I first saw it enacted, and we were in the high council room, that big long table, and they were and just the way that those two individuals did that was incredibly empowering. And it was amazing. They were both very respectful. The young man made sure, the young woman was a little bit shyer, not much, but he made sure that she, was co-voice, co-equal, everything like that. So I see that the church moving in the direction of showing us that example of how we can do it in our homes. So, and so as long as you feel respected, and I have felt respected overall and so I felt very, very equal, with your dad and a co-partner. The other thing is I think about single women, whether they're divorced, widowed, never married. I believe very much in compensatory blessings. So if someone's in a relationship where maybe the husband is not a member or doesn't hold the priesthood, or you're the head of the house because you're the only one there, I have seen the compensatory blessings that the Lord provides for those people. Joe and I this morning were talking about workarounds with figuring things out. When one door closes, we find another way out of the house.
Yeah, exactly.
Or in the house, like it might be a really big window, or something, because we always feel like we have to go in a certain door, but the Lord always provides a way, and it's different, but it works really well. And so, as in terms of a female who's not experiencing having that ordained male in her home, whether it's a son or a father or a husband, it's still workable, doable, and the Lord will bless them in a way so different and so amazing than in a traditional type of home, is what I just am thinking in my mind of different women that I know, and how powerful, how strong they are, and what amazing examples they are to me. And they have had to take on both of those stewardships in some way, take on the nurturing and the provide and protect for their home. And so, and as long as they stay on the covenant path, I've seen great things come of that. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I just think of President Nelson has talked about how, sisters, if someone tells you, if you're a single sister, you don't have anyone who holds the priesthood in your home, and they say, "I'm so sorry you don't have the priesthood in your home," he said, "No, that's incorrect. That's an incorrect statement. And it's because those who are endowed, who have entered into the temple, have been clothed with and received priesthood power."
Yes.
And so, I mean, that the ordinances thereof, the power of godliness is made manifest. That's in Doctrine and Covenants. And we find in our marriage and in my own life that personal righteousness will always trump ordination, in my opinion. I feel like I've seen, because you think about it, you think about miracles and blessings that have come to saints, converts to the church, prior to them being members of the church, right?
Right.
I mean, visions, experiences, those are valid, empowering experiences, even without being given the full knowledge of the gospel.
Yeah.
Then you add the gospel to it, and those people who are already righteous, good, faithful men and women just flourish. You see, I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key, is you can be born into the church, you can be in a traditional, marriage in the temple, and still be, I don't know what the right term is, but not living up to your privilege of the Spirit, not living up to your privilege of having the power of the priesthood in your home. And vice versa, you could not have those experiences or blessings given in this life, but through personal righteousness and I'm not even saying perfection, right? It's not from because I check these boxes, but when I think of personal righteousness, what I mean to define that is attempting, striving, seeking to be clean, to be wholesome, and to be seeking to live as the Savior would have you live. And that's where I think we find that those sisters you talk about, and I've seen even brothers whose spouses die. It's not as common, but brothers who are single dads, that they are able to be provided with and strengthened in a way that is really special and unique. So
personal righteousness and obedience, and that's really where the personal righteousness comes from, right? It's obeying the Spirit. And even for you and I as lifelong members, there's always self-improvement and growth. It never ends, right? And so anything we can have added upon us to help us in that, the daily scripture study, the temple, visiting the temple regularly and often, being obedient to what the Spirit guides us of what we should be doing more of and what we should be doing less of. And that's a daily thing. And so for me, I'm really like what you said about the personal righteousness, because I could have a really grumpy day and lose part of the Spirit. And I feel like I lose part of my growth with that. But if I stay on task, then I have more of the Spirit, and then He can tell me, okay, this is what you need to do. And a lot of it is, how reaching outside of myself to other people. And why I'm so grateful for your father is that I have more of that flexibility to do that because of the way he's presided with the priesthood, and his support. I feel like when a husband and father presides with their priesthood, that allows the wife and mother the flexibility, the safety, the creativity to be able to serve more. I've seen that when a husband's not presiding, I feel like if he's not presiding righteously, it really limits the way his wife can serve. I've noticed that huge difference. And that just came to me just now. So it's not just about what happens within your family. It's about how your family is able to reach out and serve other people as well. So there's so many facets to it. And, the bottom line is my testimony. The priesthood has increased incredibly because the priesthood's not just for the ordination of the man. The priesthood power is involved with men and women. It's involved with sister missionaries when they, teach and preach and serve. And, you and I have had discussions about other ways that priesthood is involved in people's lives. And so the power itself is an incredible gift from Heavenly Father. I mean, huge gift. And if I had one parting thought, is that if you want to increase in your personal righteousness and define your divine purpose, either as a male or female, husband, wife, mother, father, whatever your relationship status is right now, study the priesthood. And that's what President Nelson has told us. He wanted the women especially to study the priesthood. And that's my testimony grew of the divine feminine is actually through studying the priesthood. And I was really surprised at that. I didn't realize that was where the research for this book was going to take me, but it did. I just can't say enough good things about it. And I continue to study and I continue to learn more. And I think the church is becoming more, from the time of Joseph Smith, when the priesthood restored to him, how the brethren are understanding more themselves about how the priesthood works, what it is. And we've seen President Nelson make a few administrative changes because they're finally realizing, well, to be a witness at a baptism, you don't need to
have an office,
be ordained, right, to the priesthood. Things like that's just one of many, many examples of what President Nelson has restored, or, to the church. And so, any final thoughts that you have on presiding, or on families, on men and women?
No, just that it's a beautiful thing. I think that the purposes of this life are so much more joyously fulfilled. And at least in my experience, it's been so much better as I've tried to do it together with Muriel and our son Jackson, because that's like the icing on the cake on anything,
And it's worth the time
it
takes. That's the thing, as having been married as long as I've been married, that it's laziness on my part mostly, but we've both had that issues where it would just be so much faster if I could just make the decision about X, Y, or Z, and if he would just leave it to me and let me handle it. But I have found it works out so much better if we work together and make the decision together. Even if he thinks, well, it should be better one way, and I say it should be better another way, we usually are able to come together and come up with a much better solution together
than either of the previous.
Oh yeah, so much better. And I just really feel the Spirit of the Lord working with that and teaching us that. And it takes time, and it depends on the personalities.
Yeah.
Your dad and I, it takes a little bit longer than maybe you and Muriel. But we're getting there, and it's actually become a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
To be totally honest, we live on a homestead, and just to go out and walk around and decide together how to where to put something or how to do something. I may secretly get a little frustrated because I want to do it one way and just get it done now. But then at the end of the conversation, it's like, wow, yeah.
That's a way better way.
It was worth the time.
Same.
It was worth the time. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Joe, my favorite son. I'm saying it publicly. You're my favorite son.
It's not hard because I'm your only son. Huh?
Well, but still, you're my favorite. And thank you so much for talking with me today on this podcast. And so grateful for you and Muriel and Jackson. You've brought a lot of light and life into our existence. So
thank you.
But thank you so much to my listeners for joining. I really appreciate it. And please subscribe if you have the chance and the opportunity. And let's just go forth and serve. Thank you. Until next time.